Hello everybody, today we're going to try and find out the best build for Warwick as he is on his PvE release for his rework in 2017. So, when you want to first try to... Hello everybody, today we're going to Hello everybody, today we are going to figure out the best build for Warwick's rework as he is on the PvE. So basically, whenever you want to try and find out the best possible build for a champion, you have to look at their abilities and try to decipher which stats would be the best on that kit. So, as we look at this new Warwick kit, we notice that all of his abilities deal magic damage, but scale off of AD. So that means he's kind of like the Corki of jungle, where he does primarily magic damage, but it all scales off AD, and he also basic attacks, which gives him a lot of physical damage output as well. But mostly, he's going to be magic damage, but scale with AD. So one of the main stats you'd want to get on him is Magic Pen, especially since his Q does 10% of the target's maximum health, and max health damage is especially good with Magic Pen / Armor Pen, depending on what type of damage it is. In this case, Magic Penetration. So one of the best stats that we should prioritize in this build is magic damage. The second one is obviously AD, since he has a very high AD scaling of 120, and a high AD scaling on his ult of 167% bonus AD. So AD is going to be very useful on him. And also he basic attacks a lot, so his basic attacks obviously scale off AD, which will be very important. The second most important stat will be just tankiness, which is health, armor, and magic penetration, just because of the type of champion he is. He's melee, he tries to get in his face, he's also DPS, he's kind of like a Shyvana, a Skarner. He'll need to get in their face, and to be able to survive that way of attacking, obviously he'll need to be a bit tanky. And then the fourth, and maybe not as important stat, would be movement speed, because the range of his ult is dependent on his current movement speed. But the reason I say it's not as important is because the ult is a long cooldown, and you'll only really need that high movement speed when you are about to ult. So that can be covered by taking the summoner spell Ghost instead of Flash, which we will be doing for this build. And also we're going to get a Dead Man's Plate, which will be more than enough movement speed to have a decent range on his ult when you're about to ult. And also, he gets a ton of free movement speed from his W, so we won't really need to prioritize movement speed that much. And also, you may be thinking we need to prioritize attack speed because of his passive and the way he works through most of his damage being basic attacks. But we actually don't need to, because his W gives him 110% attack speed, and this is tripled when champions are below 200% maximum health. So at rank 5, when champions are below 20% maximum health, he will get 330% attack speed. So we really don't need to prioritize attack speed at all. We will be getting one attack speed item in this build, which will be pretty good to amplify that percentage. But yeah, we don't really need to prioritize attack speed too much with this build. So, yeah. Also, another thing about damage is that, besides his playstyle, is that damage is very important because of his damage reduction, which basically amplifies the power of his tankiness, obviously. So, now that we've established all of Warwick's shit, well, actually, one more thing to say, his Q and his ult heal him based off the damage dealt. His ult heals him 100%. His Q heals him 70% at max rank. And since they do magic damage, and especially with the Q, with the target percent maximum health, Magic Pen is basically also gonna be kind of lifesteal / spell vamp, because it will amplify the damage by a ton, and obviously he heals based off the damage he deals with Q and ult. So AD and Magic Penetration are technically kind of also gonna be lifesteal for this build, so that'll be pretty good. Anyways, onto the build that I set up here. Obviously, we're going to have Ghost and Smite. Warwick doesn't really need Flash too much because he has his gap closers with W with the movement speed, Q with the dash, and obviously ult with the huge jump. So he won't really need Flash too much, and Ghost also synergizes very well with his ult, so you'll just be going Flash Ghost all the time. For runes, usually for jungle, you would have attack speed, but since I said before with the W giving so much extra attack speed, especially if the enemy is low on health, you don't really need that much extra attack speed, and Magic Penetration is super important. I accidentally put Glyph of Magic Pen here. We don't actually want Glyphs of Magic Pen in this build, my bad. But we will have Magic Penetration Marks and Quints. We'll have armor yellows because it's a jungle and you need armor versus the jungle. And then we'll have cooldown per level glyphs. The only cooldown item we're gonna get in this build is Warrior, besides maybe the Spirit Visage if you need it. So that won't give too much cooldown reduction, and since this ability is gonna be heavily inspired or heavily use Magic Penetration, we want to have this Q up as much as possible since it's going to be your primary damage. And so cooldown is kind of important. You don't really need to have max cooldown, but having cooldown per level helps you just gradually get more cooldown over the course of the game, which will be very nice, and you don't really need the cooldowns immediately, so yeah, if you did not know yet, this build is going to be mostly focused on late game. It's also going to be pretty good mid game too, so per level is way better than just getting flat cooldown reduction in this case. For masteries, we have the spell increase, because again, we don't really need the attack speed too much, and it only gives 4%. I mean, when you compare it to a number like his W, that's like pitiful, and increased ability damage will help with his max percent damage on Q. We will be getting Fresh Blood because we really don't need Feast, and Expose Weakness, come on, we're not a support. We're gonna be killing these motherfuckers, nobody else. We're gonna get the Lifesteal and Spell Vamp because Warwick doesn't really need AP at all. He doesn't scale off AP at all, so Natural Talent's kind of useless. We could get For this, we could get Bounty Hunter or Double-Edged Sword. I prefer Bounty Hunter just because we're going to be killing a lot. We're probably going to get the max benefit out of this. And Double-Edged Sword obviously does additional damage. But Bounty Hunter or Double-Edged Sword is best here, depending on your preference. For here, we're going to have Piercing Thoughts because Magic Penetration is super good. As I've said multiple times, the whole build is mainly based on Magic Penetration. And for the last one here, we're going to have Warlord's Bloodlust, just so we have that extra lifesteal. We can survive in fights longer. You could also get Fervor of Battle. It really depends on your preference. For the Cunning Tree, we're going to skip it because it's not really as important as the Resolve Tree. I'll explain it right now. Movement speed out of combat is kind of good for the ult, but not super necessary as it's not a priority stat. And Merciless would be good in most case scenarios, but it does 5% increased damage when champions are below 40% health. Considering that Warwick is going to get buffed a shit ton when champions are that low, it kind of seems like overkill and not super useful. And then obviously Dangerous Game is always going to be pretty useful. But the reason I want to do Resolve is because Merciless is overkill, honestly. And it can just help you get more tanky with the bonus Magic Resist Armor. You could also go Recovery. This movement speed is probably better than Wanderer for the setting up for the alt and just roaming in general. Extra lifesteal, as I said before, Warwick heals off of his Q and alt, which both do magic damage, and so the magic penetration and AD we will be prioritizing will help make runic armor even more useful because the heal will be bigger, and then the percentage will take out increase the healing by more, basically. So this is just going to be really good for what we're doing. And I just get Fearless because I like Fearless a lot. It helps you absorb a lot of damage when you're first engaging, which I think is very useful. It's really based on preference, which one you want to go here, just based off your playstyle, but I usually like to do Fearless. For the abilities, it's pretty straightforward, just max Q so you can get that max percent health up, since, wrong tabs. The ability gets 6 to 10 at max rank, and the healing percentage also increases, and it's gonna be your main source of damage. So obviously you wanna max that first. Max W next for that amazing attack speed. You could also max E if you're doing badly, but majority of E's power, which is the 1 second flee, and just having damage reduction for 2.5 seconds, is already just there at level 1. It doesn't really increase. The only thing that increases is the cooldown, decreases the cooldown, and increases is the damage reduction, but the damage reduction only increases by 20%, so it's not as useful as maxing up W. But if you are in a sticky situation, you could max E second. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And now on to the meat of this video, the build. So obviously you're going to start with Hunter's Machete because his Q and his alt do on-hit effects. So that's actually another stat that I forgot to mention at the beginning. That's kind of important. I'd put it at level 4 importance under tank. Is on hit, since on hit effects, since his Q and his alt proc on hit effects, so that is also very useful. So basically with Hunter's Machete, it's going to be more useful than Talisman because Talisman is usually for abilities, but Hunter's Machete is on hit and all his abilities do on hit, so basically this is just more powerful on Warwick. Next we're going to get Warrior because having the 10% CDR is super nice. We're not really going to get it from anything else unless you happen to get Spear Visage if there's a lot of magic damage on the enemy team. And it's just more useful for having the Q up more often. And it gives a ton of AD early on, which will be very good for amplifying the damage on the Q and alt. And the other options and the other arguments for this build would be Cinderhulk and Blood Razor. The reason I wouldn't get Cinderhulk is because Warwick's like a fighter, and when you really think about it, on how many fighter champions do you really prioritize Cinderhulk? Like on Skarner I get Warrior, on Vi I get Warrior, on Shyvana I get Blood Razor, and then go tanky after that, and I usually do fine. Cinderhulk's only really for champions that have a lot of damage that scale off health, kind of like Sejuani, or for just champions that are just better at going straight tank and don't really scale off damage too well. So yeah, Cinderhulk's more for those type of champions, not champions like Warwick and Shyvana and stuff like that. The other main contender to Warrior would be Blood Razor. But the reason I don't get Blood Razor is because, again, you don't really need to prioritize attack speed too much because of the W. And the on-hit is nice that you get, but you just simply you get more out of Warrior because of his awesome AD scaling, and CDR is pretty important. It is kind of a shame that you're going to miss out on the on-hit passive on it, but I just prefer Warrior. Blood Razor actually may be better, but no, Warrior just gives better stats overall. The attack speed isn't super necessary on Blood Razor. Next for the core will be Wit's End. So Wit's End is gonna be super good on Warwick. It was already good on Warwick before the rework, but holy shit. Wit's End is going to be the item on Warwick. It takes away, it steals magic resist from the enemy on hit, which basically is kind of pseudo magic penetration because you're taking away their magic resist. It does on-hit magic damage, a sizable chunk of on-hit magic damage, which will work on all his abilities. It gives the little bit of attack speed boost you'd probably need to start attacking people before Blood Hunt activates, because you're going to get the massive attack speed boost when they're lower on health, so you do want a tiny bit of attack speed to get them to that lower health, and Wit's End will provide that. And the only kind of unnecessary thing, it probably will be necessary in most games, but if you're against a full AD team, it'll kind of be useless, as the extra MR it gives. But even if I was against full AD teams, I would still get this just because every other thing on it just works so well with Warwick and his kit, and the fact that all his damage does magic penetration. Does magic damage. I already explained why magic penetration is so important, so I'm kind of repeating myself at this point. Sorcerer's Shoes, obviously, magic penetration is more really important. Again, Warwick is basically going to be the core key of jungle in terms of building. Next, we'll have Dead Man's Plate to help with the ult and just to get more tanky in general. Also, having a good health armor item will be nice, since you already got a MR from Wit's End, so now obviously you probably need some armor, unless you're against a full magic damage team, which doesn't really happen too often. Next, you can get Titanic Hydra, so we have that little bit more AD, and we can start, and it's on hit, which is very nice on Warwick, and it'll give you some damage for being tanky, which will go into the last item, which you'll get one of these depending on the situation. You can just figure it out for yourself. If you need the passive on this, you get this. Basically, just get one of these how you need it. And that is basically the optimal build, I think, for Warwick. And hopefully I'll be able to test this out on the PBE soon. When I started recording this, the PBE wasn't up. It is about to be up now. So I will basically play a game, show you how it goes and with this build, and yeah, but you'll also have to take it with a grain of salt, because PBE, the skill levels are very crazy erratic on PBE. There's maybe some diamonds playing against some bronze, some silver playing against some platinums, you know. It's gonna be all crazy, and I may just do really well just because there's a lot of low-level people on there. Two more things I want to say real quick. Number one, I took Skirmisher Saber over any other smite because for the blue smite, it's for gap closing. You already have gap closers with Q, W, and R. Seems a little unnecessary. And on top of that, red smite does on-hit damage, which, as I said, Q and R do on-hit, and obviously your basic attacks do on-hit. So it's going to amplify your entire damage. And also, the damage reduction on it is going to work very well with your E. Whenever you're 1v1ing someone, they're gonna get so pissed off from that red smite E and all your abilities. It just synergizes way too well not to get it. And number two, something I want to say for you jungle mains who are thinking of assimilating the new Warwick into your champion pool is when to pick him, obviously. I'd say Warwick is good for mid to late game, magic damage, mostly mixed type carry, who also does max percent health, so very good versus tanks. So you'd probably want to play it versus tanks if your team needs magic damage, stuff like that. Kind of the reasons why you'd pick Elise, but instead of for early game, you do it for late game. Okay, so I finished the game, and I did actually really well. I went 12-1-9. If you're wondering why it's 4v4, I had to go into a custom because blind pick isn't available right now on PBE, so I did it through a custom, but these were the results. This was the damage I did to champs, a shit ton, mostly magic damage as I predicted. But something that came up, this PBE patch, they added something to his Q. They added a 100% AP ratio to his Q, so that basically just turns the whole build that I suggested on its head. because you could go things like Void Staff, Gnasher's Tooth, Landry's Torment, or whatever, and it may be better than this build. But for now, I'm just gonna upload this video, and if in the future when this comes to live and I test out more, I'll make a follow-up video showing you how to play full AP Warwick, or like hybrid Warwick, or just like update this video with an annotation or something. But that is basically it for now. I guess I have more work to do on getting the most optimal build for Warwick now that they added that. But yeah, Riot, what the fuck? Why did you add a 100% AP ratio? Warwick is gonna be so OP now. There's so many build options for him now. It's like Mordekaiser levels of like every item could work on him. Anyways, I'm gonna stop rambling now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. That's actually copying another YouTuber.